And now it is time to welcome our first group. This group I had the pleasure of working with directly. They are the researching and presenting on the Moffitt Cancer Center here in Tampa. Presenting today, we have Ms. Lorrin Rucker. She's the philanthropic and health equity advisor at Moffitt Cancer Center. Ms. Faith Pullen, she's Executive Director for the Florida Association for Community Action. And Mr. Phalen Brown, Operations Expert at Anthem Inc. So for the Moffitt Cancer Center group, I invite you to the podium.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the TOBA board and also to the TLI committee and also to all of our judges and guests that are here with us today. Thank you, Gary, for the introduction. As Gary mentioned, I'm Faith Pullen. I'll be joined today by my colleagues, Lorrin Rucker and Phalen Brown. We will be presenting to you on Moffitt, and the purpose of our presentation for today is really to explore the ways that Moffitt can increase the participation of Black citizens in Hills or in Tampa Bay area to their life-saving services and care. Now, in order to achieve our stated purpose, we've come up with 3 areas. It's really a 3-pronged approach that we feel that Moffitt should take in order to increase that participation. Now, that 3-pronged approach includes creating a diversity-centered leadership initiative, also increasing the presence of Black clinicians. And when we say that, we're talking all clinicians, not just physicians. And then establishing a targeted outreach plan. And you will hear about each of these as we go through our program today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Lorrin Rucker, who will be discussing institutional values and operations. Lorrin?
Thank you so much, Faith. I have the pleasure of going over the institutional values and operations of Moffitt. This year celebrates 35 years of amazing cancer work. Moffitt opened its doors in 1986, founded by H. Lee Moffitt. It is now a comprehensive cancer center since 2001. Right now, we have national rankings in patient outcomes and, of course, top 5 in hospital diversity, earning a 3 spot in Diversity Inc.'s hospital diversity ranking. The mission of Moffitt is to prevent and cure cancer, of course, and transform care through service, science, and partnership. And I'd like to take a time to recognize a major pillar in the Moffitt Foundation, which is Judge George Edgecombe. A friendship between our founder, H. Lee Moffitt, and Judge George Edgecombe has led to the establishment of the George Edgecombe Society. Unfortunately, Mr. Edgecombe lost his life at the age of 33 to leukemia after serving only 3 years on the Hillsborough County bench as a judge. And he is the youngest to this date to do so. Since we've established the Judge George Edgecombe Society, we have raised $1.2 million for research and for care and outreach for the Black community. And in terms of the disparities and why we're raising funds, I'll lead this over to Phalen to give us a little bit of insight on disparities.
All right, thank you, Lorrin, for reintroducing us to another great Tampa hero. Healthcare disparities affect all communities, but as you see from the slide here, African Americans are affected by cancer at a much greater rate. Almost regardless of the type of cancer, we seem to be dying the most. Black women die from breast cancer at about 40% greater rate, and Black men die about twice as often from prostate cancer. We're all aware that the cost of healthcare is very expensive. So What is Moffitt doing to move towards healthcare equity? Well, first of all, there's a great vouchers program. This has assisted about 2,000 people in recent years. It's a great way to fill in the gaps in preventative care if you are uninsured. So if you are uninsured or you know someone who's uninsured, please have them reach out to Moffitt and see if they may qualify. There is a limited number of vouchers. They are needs-based, but you can see these are very effective for helping out with screening tests, things like prostate and colon cancer, as well as mammography. As far as the financial investment, Moffitt has also been a great partner there. $25 million and greater has already been allocated towards clinical research. And nearly another $1 million has been earmarked for community services. Within the next 5 years, there will also be another campus up and operational in the Pasco County area. This project is laden with incentives, and one of the most fantastic things that we're looking towards is the increased number of jobs. Hopefully, nearly 15,000 new opportunities for folks in Pasco County. Now, we do love our friends and family in Pasco, but I'd like to invite Ms. Pullen back to the mic, and she's going to share with you exactly why we need to take care of home.
Thank you, Phalen. So we know for an institution such as Moffitt that data is going to be very important, right? Most of the decisions are going, if not all, will be made based on data. So we wanted to make sure that as we were going through our recommendations and coming up with our plan, that we delved into the data. Now, there's a lot of data, guys, and I really love data, but we couldn't put it all up here. So we'll just look at these two. The very top set of data that you see there refers to the new patients that were treated at Moffitt in the 1920 year. And then the bottom set of data looks at all of the Moffitt patients. So the one thing that I would like to point your attention to and to tell you how to read the chart, if you take a look at that first column there. So we look at our males, right? We had just over 16,000 white males that actually were treated at Moffitt compared to only just over 1,000 Black males. If we take a look over to our percentages for our new patients only, we're sitting right at about 73% of Moffitt's new patients are white compared to 5.5% that were Black. And then for all patients total, taking a look here, we'll just look at the percentages. About 80% of Moffitt's patients are white. In this 1920 year compared to just about 6% of their patients being Black. Now, as Phalen mentioned, we know that the Black population is really affected by most cancers at a higher rate, so we really would like to see those numbers increased. The slide that you see here, we just wanted to provide some additional information for you all. This looks at payer mix and also origin and some of the most frequent cancer sites. But what we would like to point your attention to is this area right here. The majority of Moffitt's patients actually come from Hillsborough County, the Tampa Bay area. So what does the data tell us? The data tells us, as I mentioned, that Hillsborough County is the primary source of the patients, right? But that 6% number is pretty concerning, 6% of Blacks being treated at Moffitt. And then the other stat is that our Black females are being treated at about a 2-to-1 ratio over Black males. And I just want to point out here, that's actually the case for all race groups. We just couldn't present that data to you all here for time. But ultimately, the conclusion is that more work needs to be done. And we are excited because we have some recommendations and a plan to get that work done. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to my colleagues, Phalen and Lorrin, and they'll go through the beginning of our plan.
Thank you, Faith, for going over those numbers. And again, showing us why it's important that we take care of us right here in Hillsborough County. So I know everyone's excited to see and hear, well, what exactly do we propose here? Well, we have 3 big items as far as our group recommendations. First off will be our enhanced leadership development. Then we'll talk a little bit about the strategic recruitment. And last, go into our targeted outreach. So as far as our leadership development, we intend this to start from the top down. We need to develop people better. Our recommendation is that the current board members at Moffitt actually mentor the high-level management. Set this in place for 1 to 2 years, have it backed and assisted via HR. The value for this, increased performance. It's shown that proteges not only have a higher level of commitment, they're more loyal, and they're more productive. There will always be a time to build more widgets. But right now, we're talking about building better people. So as we partner, let's turn these areas of opportunity into the much needed solutions. And the change we're asking for, it must be systemic, intentional, and it has to include those who are underrepresented. Our leaders need mentoring, and not only that, we deserve it. As far as our strategic recruitment, we ask that there be more candidates coming from our fantastic historically Black colleges and universities. This is where more than 50% of doctors and engineers who are Black receive their degrees. So to address the concern of developing stronger candidates, we'd like to see more seminars and speaking engagements for those that are involved as young as the middle school age. How powerful would it be to have those young eyes see a variety of clinicians? That way they can understand the reason to have a successful plan for education and how that transitions into a rewarding place in the workforce. This also falls in line with what the National Cancer Institute invests as far as education and career growth. If we can also increase the amount of internships for HBCU scientists, this is a good point as it relates directly towards our clinical research. These individuals will be helping the community, and we also need more help from the at-risk population to actually participate in the clinical trials. That way we can find out the new techniques as far as the research goes, and it comes out with our great outcomes. For our third area, we'd like to share how Moffitt can go ahead and expand their current footprint right here in Hillsborough County. And I'd like to invite Lorrin back, and she's going to share with us the points on our strategic neighborhood outreach.
Thank you so much, Phalen. After a lot of data and a lot of, I would say, boring things, I want to get to the strategic solution. And when it comes to sustainable change, there isn't a need to reinvent the wheel. We have the solution, and that is the George Edgecombe Society. The George Edgecombe Society is how we're going to place strategic outreach in 4 areas of Tampa Bay through 4 hub system. This 4 hub system would be East Tampa, West Tampa, Palm River, and University area. And how we would fund these outreach projects would be through corporate dollars. We would like to have corporate ambassadors for each of the 4 hubs, as well as community ambassadors to ensure that we're building trust. Moffitt is building trust in the community. Where do we start? Again, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. We already have open projects, and that is the Skills Center Collaborative. It is a multi-purpose community center that's based in the East Tampa area, which is offering over 180 jobs and currently is wanting to offer resources as an education, health, and wellness training as well. So it is our pilot and our suggestion that the first George Edgecombe Health Equity Hub be in East Tampa, the Skills Collaborative Center, and our first corporate sponsor would be Under Armour. So our slogan, join TOBA and George Edgecombe as we armor up against health disparities, because health equity is the armor everyone deserves. What will these hubs have? How will they provide services to these 4 sectors? So each hub is based off of a 2-approach system, which is community and research. We'll be addressing transportation needs, referral opportunities, screening opportunities, clinical trial surveying, community health fairs, as well as educational workshops. And all of this is based out of a corporate shared value solution. So we are taking an issue that we know exists, and we are putting it on the community, not just Moffitt, but the community to find its answer. And how TOBA plays a role is TOBA will serve as a community ambassador for each of these 4 sectors. and serve as a external counsel, if you will, for for Moffitt, to keep a pulse on the Black community to ensure that we are not just providing services, but we are also building trust. And it's our recommendation, of course, to have this East Pilot area in the Skills Collaborative Center. There's a remaining of $4 million that's needed to complete that project. We think Under Armour and Moffitt can fit that bill. Of course, the other sectors, while we're building this pilot, we would love to have a mobile service opportunity for West Tampa, Palm River, and the university area while we run the East Tampa pilot. And that approximate cost is about $1 million. The external partners that we have in terms of providing land to possibly one day have physical locations for all 4 sectors would be partnering with the city of Tampa and Hillsborough County to see if we can have land provided for us. And staffing would also come through our HBCU recruitment pipeline. So that would be, of course, resident medical students, current students, or anyone that's interested in a STEM background. And I want to round this off to Faith so we can close out with our return on investment.
Thank you, Lorrin. Hopefully you all the awesome ideas that we have. Now, one of the things that we wanted to highlight is that we do know that Moffitt is going to do the right thing because Moffitt has been doing the right thing. We've heard from speakers and our own interviews that there have certainly been some strides that Moffitt has made. And with what we're suggesting with our hubs, our HBCU pipeline, and our diversity initiative, this gives Moffitt some outcomes, right? The very first is a larger piece of that $6.5 billion, that's billion with a B, that is available in federal funding for cancer research to national cancer institutes. And that's because of innovation. One thing that we found out is that the research for Black cancer patients, there's lacking participation. So by Moffitt engaging and establishing these hubs across the Tampa Bay area, that's a research base right there in the community. You're treating the patients and you also have access to those same patients to increase research. So that gives a competitive advantage. Again, that goes back to funding and it goes back to being able to have a larger portion of that pie. With our HBCU pipeline that we're recommending, that allows Moffitt to serve as a national model for how to work with our HBCUs. And I don't know if you recall, but Phalen mentioned 50% of our doctors and engineers are being turned out of our HBCUs. So again, Moffitt becomes a national leader there. The last thing that I'd like to take a look at is employee retention. We did hear through our interviews and through our research that Moffitt would like to increase employee retention. So who would not want to work at an institute that was already innovative and now is taking additional steps to be a leader in other areas of research and servicing and partnering with the community? So this is a win-win for everyone. At this point, we'd like to stop our presentation and we're happy to open it up for any questions from the audience. Thank you.
We will now open for Q&A from the judges, followed by questions from the general audience.
Sorry. Let me repeat my question. You mentioned that you needed land or location, and you wanted to partner with the city of Tampa. Can you describe what you would need, if that's an acre, or do you need to be in a place that's already built, or is Moffitt planning to build something? Can you explain?
I'm happy. I'll start and I'll turn it over to my colleague Lorrin, who may want to add some additional details. But we do know that we're looking, well, with East Tampa, we're talking about partnering with an existing facility, right? But as we expand to those other 4 areas, we may need land for actually building a new facility. We're talking about research, right? We're talking about doing something that's never been done before. So with that, we're going to have to bring in innovative ideas and all of the materials and everything that would be needed for that. So the land would be provided, and then there will, and most likely in most of those cases, be building. I'm not sure if we know the exact acreage for that. But if not, we'll be able to get that information to you. Lorrin, anything you want to add?
I don't have any insight on acreage, but in terms of what we're looking, it would be ideal to have an already existing plot, and of course, have somewhere where we can have a hub, some kind of community center type of land, because we don't want to create an extended outpatient or extended research center, but we do want to create more of a community hub. So existing centers probably would be ideal. And I think it's probably the most, realistic at this time, rather than creating a whole nother project when we do have an open project in Pascal, which is about 25 million.
So yes, good morning. Very good presentation. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
I do have a question. Like you, I'm data driven as well. And I know that you presented the data on both the Black and white participants. But when being a representative of the city of Tampa, we have to be all inclusive of the community. And my question is, have you looked at other sectors, in what were how did they relate to what you have here? Let's say the Hispanic Latino community or the Asian American or Pacific Islander community, even though they're smaller in context in the city of Tampa. And then what were some of those outcomes? How did they relate to what you've already presented?
Thank you. Very good question. We did. And really, for the sake of time, we have a 15-minute presentation. We had to pare that data down. One of the things that I mentioned earlier and that we saw, which was really interesting to all of us, is that across all race categories, we see that females access services at almost a 2-to-1 ratio across the board. So that was something, we didn't go into it in this presentation, but we discussed as a group as having an initiative in those hubs to actually look at our males and increasing that male participation. Now, the focus of our project was looking at the Black community, but of course, we did look at data across all of those race areas.
Thank you. And this is Gary Vian, and thank you very much. The great presentation. I do have some comments or a question for you, but I also have some comments on presentation and style and content and all those other things. I'll wait until the questions are done. So the question is, going back to that $4 million that you were looking at, is that all for research, or is that for building a building as was stated before? Or was that, is that infrastructure? Is that purchasing all those types of things?
So sorry, we didn't get to dive deeper into that for the sake of time, but that's a great question. In terms of the Skills Collaborative project, it is already a standing project. Their open cost for that is about $10 million, and they have about $4 million left in funding. So what we're doing here isn't a corporate shared value thing. We're putting the cost out to corporations to fill that gap, so that Moffitt can come in and create that hub.
Very good, thank you. I'll pass my question.
Good morning. A great presentation. So my question was, did you all get to actually do any research on the actual disparities in the Black communities for where the hubs would be? I know you didn't have too much time to share on that, but I would have loved to hear some of that data too.
Thank you. Another good question. And actually, with our groups our colleagues that will be presenting in their area, they really did the deeper dive into those areas. And I will not speak to their presentation because we were not a part of it. But I think that perhaps some of that information will come from them, but we are not in a position to answer that.
Any other comments or questions from the judges?
I could just take just a moment. I just dropped down some notes on presentation style and content and all those types of things. And you are by far the best one we've seen today. So the intro was very good. The setup was great, having a little bit of history. Phalen, when you get up, I would probably give that clicker to someone else rather than you, so you won't be using that and trying to talk at the same time. And these are all constructive things, so please take it for what I'm giving it that. I really liked, though, when you started saying we're building better people. You really emphasized that well. And there were some other great content pieces in there that really brought home and made the point, at least to me, regarding some of the racial pieces, some of the certainly the Edgecombe piece to it. I was really thrilled by that, to kind of see a little bit of that. And I got a taste of it in the beginning, and then you popped it at the end with this society. So keep that up. Thank you.
We will now open this up for Q&A from the general audience.
Thank you, sir. And to the presenters, great job. For me, I look at numbers, dollars. And I was wondering, your presentation, when you talked about the skills center, which I wasn't familiar where that is in East Tampa, but I'm looking at where your breakdown when you talk about community engagement dollars, where's the breakdown when the gentleman talked about infrastructure? Those are key components when you're talking about programs, when you're dealing with donors, because there were no specifics on those areas. And lastly, when you talk about the community engagement, I didn't see anything in reference to the actual community portion as far as looking at neighborhood associations, some of the churches where people gather, where most of your elderly people are getting cancer, probably will have a lift to be able to get those people into those hubs that you're talking about.
I will take this one. So thank you so much for your question, sir. I'll start with your latter question, which is how we're going to get to these people. The reality of it is that, for example, with the Army, there's no longer a draft. There's recruiters that go to high schools and they come and they give you incentives or what have you. The reality of it is that Moffitt has to go out and be in these communities. That's just the reality. The numbers speak for themselves. So what the future looks like is a hub that is created based off of corporate dollars, and they're funded that way. So right now, the Skills Center for the sake of this presentation is a pilot. But in our, I guess, our reality that we're living in right now, what it looks like is a complete mobile system. So we are actually going into the community, we're surveying, we're using TOBA, we're using other churches or what have you, salons, barbershops, pulse checking, because the reality of it, there is a strong mistrust in the medical field, the Black community in general. So we can't just go out and say, let me screen you. We have to go and build that relationship. There has to be some kind of sort of social capital. So all of these particular hubs are going to start first with building trust. And then once we have the gauge and the pulse check on the community, then we go in and we provide services. And then we come back with a TOBA related council and we pulse check to make sure we're doing the right thing. Because the reality of it is that we have to send people that look like ourselves out there. And we have to have an understanding and cultural competency of the work that we're doing. So I definitely think that's a great sector. And for the first portion of your question about the breakdown for donors, these 4 sectors, these 4 hubs are going to have corporate sponsors, and not just one, multiple. So when we're shopping this to corporations, it's a situation where we're saying, this is what we're doing in this area, this area, this area. These are our community partners, our churches, our salons, our barbershops, our community centers, and all 4 of these sectors. And this is how you can buy in and dedicate yourself to a certain sector. So we can work at this literally simultaneously. So it's not a long drawn out process, because as you can see by the numbers, we are far behind. So it'll give us a chance, if you want to use that shared value concept to make a situation where we are not the ones caring for ourselves, but it's a community responsibility. I hope that answers your question. I'm very long-winded.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Joey Henderson. I'm with Greater Tampa Realtors and also serve on the Community Action Board for Hillsborough County. And that was a great presentation. That's a great concept to embed the hubs in the communities. Was there any conversation with regards, and I know it wasn't, I don't think I saw it in the presentation. Was there any conversation with regards to trying to partner with the local school systems to get high school students to maybe intern or work in those hubs, to be able to see people like themselves and maybe inspire a whole new generation of doctors?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Henderson. That's in process. I'm a graduate of Irwin Tech. I've reached out to them. My old instructors in the nursing program are more mature at this time. They're still working, but they've actually chose to stay within the high school and middle school age range. At this point, I don't have a response back from them confirming that that's available, but they are reaching out to the superintendent and others to get us that help at a younger age. So.
If I can add a little bit to that, our HBCU pipeline that Phalen was covering and that we've talked about includes reaching back and having the internships in those hubs. So we really would be looking at an approach across the board, and that does go down from middle school, high school, and then also, of course, into the college.
Okay, Thank you very much. We have time for one more question. We have an online question, actually.
This question is from Mr. Ron Weaver, watching virtually. Can Moffitt form consortium top 10 insurers fund preventative and early detection centers to reduce major cancer incidents in African American community to reduce cancer treatment payments by those 10 insurers down the road?
Thank you for that question. And if I'm understanding it correctly, that's a question of if Moffitt can actually create this. I don't know that we're in a position to answer on behalf of Moffitt for what they may be able to do. I don't know if my colleagues have anything else they want to add to that, but I'm certainly not comfortable answering on behalf of Moffitt.
Okay, thank you very much. We will continue our session.
Testing. So to the Moffitt Cancer Center group, congratulations, you guys hit a home run. Phenomenal job. Can we give them another round of applause? So they set the bar really high for the groups that will be coming up. So let me give a couple of housekeeping notes. Restrooms are right outside the door on your right. We will take an opportunity here before we segue into the next presentation to allow you guys to grab breakfast really quick. But also know for our virtual audience and for our audience in attendance, also understand that our presentations are based on a utopia that we are building. So the research, the presentation is based on a utopia that we're building. So we haven't had formal conversations with Moffitt. We haven't had formal conversations with Suncoast or the other entities that will be represented. This is a presentation based on the best case scenario. If we had the resources to make this happen, this is how it would look. So I want to make sure that we give that preface so everyone understands where we're coming from. Also, let me pause and recognize Representative Diane Hart. And Council Member Orlando Goods. So if there are any public officials, elected officials that are joining us via Zoom, we recognize you. Unfortunately, I can't see you at this moment, but know that we're in spirit and I recognize your work and your servant leadership. Also, if you have questions and you'd like to follow up with these groups afterwards, we would love to have that. In fact, we challenge you to follow up with TOBA and these groups to further the conversation about how do we move the needle forward. And more importantly, one of the entities that was spoke to in the Moffitt Cancer Center group, the Skills Center is represented here today. Ms. Celeste Roberts, the CEO of the Skills Center is here. So if we have, $4 million to make an investment today, I'm sure she will not be turning away anything.